Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Leslie Cagan has been changing the world for most of her life by organizing all kinds of movements for peace and justice. How did this all come about, that you spent a lifetime doing this?
Yeah, it has been a lifetime, and I hope it will be more of a lifetime.
Right. I hope so too.
But
for you and for the world.
Yeah, thank you. I was, very fortunate, very lucky to grow up in an activist family, and I think that really has to be credited. That I grew up in not only with a set of values about the world that have to do with peace and justice, but also have to do with just treating your friends and your family and your neighbors and people you go to school with or work with, treating people decently and fairly.
With respect.
With respect,
yeah.
Right, always with respect. And also being willing to jump in when you see a problem, right. To offer yourself as a resource to help solve problems.
I know your wonderful mother, Jessie Cagan.
She is wonderful.
Where did she learn it?
I guess she grew up in a similar atmosphere. And so I was very lucky, and then just by an accident of birth, I came of age in the 60s, was in college in the mid-60s, graduated in 1968 when, the world was on fire in many ways, and, had the good fortune to be active in many movements over the years. So, and I actually thought when I graduated from college in 68, for about 20 minutes, I thought about going to graduate school. And I thought, no.
What would you have studied?
I have a bachelor's degree in art history. And I was thinking of continuing in that. What I had realized was that was an interesting way to study history. And I still like to go to a museum when I can.
I have the same thing, actually. I majored in college in politics and government, but I also, for one term, majored in art history and just took all those courses.
Right.
And I agree with you, because I think that all that art is reflective of the times that it's created in.
Right.
So it's a very interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So anyway, but I realized again, this was 1968. I was already very active in the anti-war movement at that point. That was the Vietnam War, and realized that that's where my heart was. That's where my energy was, and ever since then, so it's been however many years that is, I've been doing.
So you've become really a master of organizing.
Well, I hope so.
And of doing it. All kinds of people and groups call on you for your advice and your assistance and your direction.
Yeah, it is true. Although sometimes I wish people would follow my direction a little more clearly.
What amazes me about you is, well, you're not as old as I am. But you really do. I mean, I grew up in the same tradition. You could change the world.
Right.
That was a responsibility to try to change the world or make it better. I'm not so sure now that I can really do that, or even that, I don't know. I think part of me always believes that. I've just become cynical from my experience in. You've always been out, so maybe that's a good thing.
Right.
But you're really optimistic, and you really feel you've accomplished things in these different movements.
Well, I am, and I am. A lot of my optimism comes from pulling on other people's experiences and what people have done against tremendous odds throughout history. And I don't feel like I've changed the world. I feel like I've made some contribution to helping people do what they can to change the world.
But you believe that people who don't agree with what's happening there can really make a difference and change.
Right. I do believe that. Once there was slavery, and now there isn't. Once women couldn't vote, and now we can. Things have changed because people, not because those in power wake up one morning and say, "Oh, gee, we were doing this wrong. We have to change things around," because they feel pressure because people organize.
Do you think that that's one of the underlying or most important reasons for demonstrations and large gatherings and protests? Is to raise the consciousness or to change the prevailing
I think there are several
opinions?
Reasons to do mass gatherings and mass protest activities. One is for the people who come to those activities. They can be extremely energizing and supportive. You'll find that, for instance, with a demonstration like we're doing this summer around the Republican Convention, people will be coming from all over the country, often from very small towns or small communities where sometimes you feel a little isolated. You come to a big gathering, you feel you're part of something bigger than yourselves, part of something bigger than your own immediate community. And that's important to keep a movement going. It's also large numbers of people protesting, marching, rallying, whatever, help send a message to those people who do have power, to the policymakers, And I think that's always important to, sometimes it feels like you're knocking your head against the wall, but it's over time that people's voices do get heard and that you can have an impact. Not that protest is the only thing people should do. People need to vote. People need to run for office, I believe, at all levels of government, and certainly people need to vote. People need to do ongoing educational work. People need to inform. We all need to keep teaching ourselves, but also work with the people where we go to school, where we work in our neighborhoods. There's, people need to try and get our voices into the media. There's all kinds of work, but I do think that the public activities, gathering together people, in the public square, if you will, is an important part of a vibrant democracy.
That sense of community and that sense of support is absolutely marvelous. And it's reflected in some of the movements, certainly in the women's movement, well, in the civil rights movement, the strength that came from everybody coming together, the gay and lesbian and what is it, bisexual, transgender. All of those, the more company you have, the stronger you feel.
But also I think that doing things in a public way, then I actually think that that's not just an okay thing to do, that's almost like a responsibility that citizens of the world have, that when you see a problem, when you have a disagreement, instead of just sitting at home and complaining at the TV, to be out there and make it a public issue and engage in debate and push the conversation in a public way.
And then you have, but then you have an enormous reliance on what we call the media. To bring that message to people who are not actually there, but you want them to see it.
Well, obviously, yes, how we interface and interact with the media is very, very important. And by media, I mean all kinds of media.
Oh, absolutely.
And some of the independent media and the small media is really also very, very valuable in helping to get the word out.
It gets increasingly more important, doesn't it, or more valuable as the internet expand. I mean, now with the expanded internet.
I think the new
reliance on these new things is not so. The old things, I mean, is not so important.
But I think you can't put aside any of the tools you have to work with. At any given moment, one tool is going to be more appropriate than another. So sometimes it's important to try and get on ABC or CBS, Sometimes the most important thing is to talk to the local community newspaper, You do all of that. You do everything you can. But also, I don't think you just rely on the media. That's why I think the old-fashioned basic principles of organizing. You go and meet people where they are. You go and knock on their doors. You go to the supermarkets. You go to the daycare centers. You go where people work, and you talk with people. That's what it's all about, and engaging people. And I think that's how change happens, because larger and larger numbers of people feel that they have some stake and some power in actually changing things.
When I was younger, Columbus Circle used to be a circle of soapboxes and speeches, And it used to be, and I don't know if it's still in ordinance or not, that if you had an American flag in a soapbox, you could speak without sound. Then I guess the sound came in and it all changed. But Marble Arch in London, do they still make those speeches there? I think they do.
So.
But we don't do that. I remember some political campaigns where we did that. Robert Kennedy, when he ran for... it was very effective. Why don't we do that more?
Well, I don't know why we don't. I think it's very, very important. I think the closest that we come to that is people going out leafleting. So again, for instance, on the organizing for the August 29th demonstration, we will pick certain Saturdays between now and then where we'll try and have hundreds of people all around the city on the same day in different neighborhoods giving out leaflets, talking to people.
We're going to talk about August 29th in a few minutes, but let's just keep on the subject. It's interesting to note that the paper in Lexington, Kentucky has done a retrospective of how that paper refused to really cover the civil rights marches and the boycotts. And it's a mea culpa thing. And evidently they're not the first ones who have done that, but it has happened. It's very appropriate always, isn't it? Because I remember with the gay march in Washington, what a victory it was considered when all those pictures were on the front page of the papers.
No, it was a tremendous breakthrough. It was actually the second gay rights march, or lesbian gay rights march. The first one in 1979 got virtually no national coverage. A few papers here or there got it, but it really was not picked up by the mainstream media. So then by 1987, when the second major march happened, which was really massive, and of course this was in the height of the AIDS crisis, although the AIDS crisis is far from over, to see the breakthrough into the mainstream media, and not just the major national press, but virtually every single hometown paper all around the country carried pictures and headlines and stories, and that really did help, obviously, bring a message. And part of that message is the humanizing thing that needs to happen. Especially I think this has been especially true for the lesbian and gay movement, bisexual, transgender movement. That these are not just words; these are people, right? And to actually you found that a lot of the coverage of that demonstration was a reporter who traveled to Washington with somebody coming from, Dubuque or Des Moines or wherever it was. So it became a very personal story, and I think that's critically important.
The march that we had in New York, United for Peace and Justice, in February. How was that covered?
Well, I think it was covered okay. I think what was really interesting, of course, about that day was not only the massive turnout in New York, but the fact that all around the world, nobody even knows the numbers, tens of millions of people on that same day were marching. And we counted at some point over 900 different activities all around the world. So that's what a lot of the press coverage was. It was as a global day of action. Right. And we got pretty decent coverage, I think, here in New York.
And then the coverage backfired on the city administration because of all the revelations afterwards about the trouble with the march.
The city still is blaming us. The mayor and the police commissioner are still blaming United for Peace and Justice for what happened that day. We really believe that the difficulties that happened that day, rest squarely on the mayor's shoulder and the police commissioner. They refused to give us a permit to march. They said we could only rally. And then when people arrived to get to the rally site, the police either didn't give the right information, gave the wrong information, gave no information, started pushing and shoving and beating people, and over 300 people ended up being arrested. Some people were trampled by horses. And literally just a month ago, the police commissioner was still saying that it was our fault that we didn't give people the right directions to get to the rally.
It was pretty impossible to even perceive what the right directions would be. All right, let's now talk about the August. What are we calling it? Is it a demonstration, a march, a rally? What is it?
Well, we're calling it all those. It's a demonstration that includes a march and a rally. And we're doing this under the umbrella of the world says no to the Bush agenda. Because what we're trying to do is to be very, very clear that even as a nonpartisan coalition, we can be and we need to be critical of the policies of this administration. And that whoever ends up in the White House next year, it's about the policies. This is not about a personality contest, but it's about what the policies are going to be of the next president. And this is an important opportunity to say that, the policies of preemptive first strike are no longer acceptable. The policies of going to war based on a pack of lies, we cannot allow that to happen. The policies that literally every single day pour billions of dollars into the military while our schools and healthcare system and housing are falling apart, none of that is acceptable anymore. We have to change it. So in order to communicate that message, we're planning a day that will include both a march and a rally on the day before the convention opens here in New York City, the Republican convention.
So the parties have platforms. Does this demonstration, rally, and everything have a platform also?
We're not developing a detailed platform. We're trying to do this, to position this in a broad way so that lots and lots of people can join us. That if you have something that you're critical of this administration about, come.
Join us.
Bring a contingent, carry your signs, wear your T-shirts, make your chants, sing your songs, make your voice heard. Then there's a place for you in this demonstration.
There's an art to putting these things together, isn't there, with all the groups? I mean, the coalitions always imply
yes.
trouble.
Yes.
Great support, but a lot of trouble, right? Because you do get groups with differing agendas.
Right.
And not everybody supports every group.
Right. And I think that what we're trying to do with this particular, and sometimes the demonstration focuses on a particular issue or a particular constituency, and if other people come along, fine. If they don't, well, so be it. But on this demonstration, we want to say that we may have different points of view about a number of different issues, but what we share is a common criticism of the Bush agenda and the policies of the Bush administration, and that there is plenty of space, we believe, on the streets of New York for everybody to have their voice heard on that day. And actually, we're also encouraging people, though, to go to the other activities that other groups are planning.
The more specific activities
right.
with more specific goals.
Right, and that we think that's all good.
It's interesting because the same phenomena is reflected in the Democratic Party. I mean, you've got people who are much further to the left than what the platform says or
right.
what the candidates are saying, but no, everybody's sort of muted
right.
in the kind of criticism that we've
right.
voiced in previous years,
right.
because we know that the biggest goal is Bush. Is that what it is?
Well, I think so. I think everyone knows that the Bush agenda and the team of people he has around him, it's not just him after all, it's that whole team, have implemented a set of policies that have just taken the country further and further in the wrong direction. And then if we don't put a stop on things now, who knows where they're going to lead us and the whole world. This has an impact on literally the lives of billions of people all around the world. I should mention, though, that we are also involved in helping to organize some activities in Boston during the time of the Democratic Convention, because we want to send a message right. to the Democratic Party and to the leadership of the Democratic Party that these issues are important to us, again, no matter who's in the White House, that we want the occupation in Iraq to end. And a Kerry administration, if that's what happens, should take immediate steps to end that occupation.
Do you have a permit now?
Well, here in New York, no, we don't. We are still in negotiations with the city, sometimes difficult and frustrating negotiations. The police department have agreed in principle that we will be able to march past Madison Square Garden on that day. The point that we're having trouble about is where the rally will be after the march. We proposed to the city, actually, we first applied for our permits June 4th, 2003. We applied,
so it's a year.
Yeah, it's over a year now. The city is now yelling at us that we're stalling things. We said, well, we put in the applications early enough so we knew this would be difficult. We needed the time to discuss it. Why did you wait 7 months before you called us to have a meeting? So in any event, we have a different point of view about where the rally should be. We are completely convinced that for something that's going to be as large as this is, and it will be hundreds of thousands of people, that what makes the most sense on a hot summer day is to have us march past the garden and then go right uptown into Central Park and have the rally on the Great Lawn, where there have been in the past many large events. I mean, that's our equivalent
that's the site
of the
of
public
demonstrations,
square.
right?
Right. So let's go there. And the city has just said no, no, no. And then we offered. We said, okay, the Great Lawn's not good. What about the North Meadow, which would be a longer march for us?
Yes.
We said, okay, what about that? No, we can't have that. We said, what about Times Square? No, can't have that. What about 3rd Avenue? No, can't have that. 3rd Avenue is one of the widest avenues in the city, and also has like a natural incline, so you have a better staging set up. No, can't have that. What the city wants us to do is to march past the garden and then to go west on 34th Street over to the West Side Highway and go all the way downtown to West Street, to Chambers Street, and to have the stage set up at Chambers and West and have people fill in on West Street. And we actually went over there last week with the police and looked at it, and there are serious problems for us there. One is where it is. It's literally on the margin of the city. That we think it's an effort to marginalize us, to put us on the edge of town. But also, it would mean that people would be out on the concrete with the sun pouring down on them all afternoon. With no relief. At least if we were on 3rd Avenue at Times Square, there's some tall buildings. You get a shadow at some point in the day, and you get a little relief. But again, we think the park makes the most sense. So while a lot of people would be out in the open, they could find relief by sitting under the trees. I mean, it's just people go to the park for relief in the summer.
It's also easier to disperse because you can go either way, north, south, east, west, or anything.
It's for a lot of reasons,
Down
it makes much more sense.
Chambers Street, it's a very complicated
thing. It's a better
thing.
setup for a sound system. You can project the sound much better, in the park and out on a long
So the reasons
highway.
for not using the park are, first it was the grass?
Well, basically what they've said is that the size of the crowd that we're going to have will do damage to the park, to the grass, and to whatever, who knows what. Now, just yesterday, the mayor started saying, now there's also a security concern. Well, this is fascinating. We've been in this conversation with the city for 4 or 5 months now, and this is the first mention of security in terms of the park. Now, we know, of course, I mean, we're not naive. We weren't born yesterday. We understand that the city, the mayor, the police, other officials in the city have serious security issues that they have to be concerned about. Well, we live in New York, too. We have security issues, too.
Right.
We don't want anything awful happening to our demonstration or to anybody else. So we take that very seriously. But we think that the way to deal with that is to sit down with us, the organizers, and figure out how do you make as secure as possible an event happen.
So when is the next meeting?
Well, our next meeting is supposed to be Friday with the police, but we have a very serious, difficult dynamic, is that the police will not talk to us about anything related to the park. They say that's in the hands of the Parks Department.
And the Parks Department, but Central Park is in the hands of the Conservancy, which is a private, not-for-profit organization.
Well, and we really think all of this is in the hands of the mayor. So we have actually requested formally and through back channels and every way we can a meeting with the mayor or one of his deputies to sit down and try and work this out with us. They won't meet with us. So now, not only are we demanding a permit, we're also demanding a meeting, which seems a little ridiculous because really what we want to be demanding is a change of the policies of the Bush administration. Right? That's the real issue
But
here.
you have a staunch Republican mayor?
Right, and we can't help but wonder, is there some, political agenda here? This mayor, a Republican mayor, has given $5 million of his own personal money to the Republicans for their convention. They've rolled out the red carpet. They're even giving, I understand that they're giving the Republican delegates the Metro cards. Not that any of them are going to take
and
the
subway. And they're going to the theater. They're giving free theater tickets.
Well, that's not from
it's
the
underwritten
city.
by somebody.
Yeah, I think the New York Times, actually.
Now, you applied for the permit a year ago. This means how long do you have to work to prepare an event like this?
Well, it really varies. I mean, we've been working on this to some degree since last year. Obviously, we didn't kick into high gear until a few months ago, or really in about February or so we started kicking into high gear, and now we're let's say last summer we were in first gear. By the winter we were in second. Yeah. Now we're in third. We're about to kick into fourth gear, and by the end of the summer we'll be in overdrive.
You have a permanent staff. I mean, you've got a core staff, and then you have lots of volunteers.
Lots of volunteers. We have some summer interns. We'll actually even hire a few other people to help us, carry the load of work. There's a tremendous amount of work, but really most of the work is done by hundreds of volunteers. We have actually tonight, even we have an organizing meeting, a citywide organizing meeting. There should be 200 or 300 people at the meeting. People will be picking up their leaflets and all that kind of stuff, and going out to the neighborhoods and talking to people, phone banking, all that.
So, is there a website?
Yes, our website is www.unitedforpeace.org. And I should say it's an excellent website. I can say that quite proudly. I don't actually do the web work, but it's got not only information about what we're doing here in New York, but all kinds of activities all around the country. We have a very good calendar. Groups all around the country put in their information. Anybody can find out what's going on.
So we're going to have to eventually wrap up. I mean, very soon wrap up. But is there a feeling of such vindication and of satisfaction as events turn out to be what you knew was happening at the time?
Well,
how do we explain all of this?
I wouldn't say, on a personal level, I don't feel a satisfaction because what would have been much more satisfying is if we could have stopped the war from happening right from the first place, and if we could bring those troops home now. I mean, virtually every day we're hearing about U.S. soldiers being killed. Then we're not even hearing about the Iraqis who are being killed and wounded. So,
it's horrible.
It's a horrible, horrible situation. And the bottom line is we were right.
Right.
We were right. They were wrong. They're still wrong.
But you're always right. That's the problem. So the frustration of people, as you said, if they only do what you tell them to do at the beginning of the program, if only people would listen.
Right. But it's obviously, each of us as an individual is very complicated. You put, groups of people together, it gets more complicated. We have a country of 260 million people now? It's a complicated entity.
Right.
So we all do our best, and I think the saddest thing is when you know what's wrong and then don't do anything, and that your own cynicism or lack of faith that people can change things or whatever it is lead you to become just immobile and you sit back and you don't do anything. That's when they've won. That's when the bad guys have won.
Which of the issues and which of the demonstrations have provided you with the most? I don't know, is the word satisfaction?
No, there is. There is a lot of satisfaction in a lot of the work. I think that certainly You know, going back to the work around the Vietnam War, it was very, very difficult. But, you know, in the end, I think the U.S. anti-war movement made a very important contribution to finally bring that war to an end. And that was important. But that work was also important because I think it helped open up a lot of people's eyes to be thinking about what is U.S. foreign policy all about. So I think that was very important work. I think certainly the work that I and many people did in the lesbian and gay movement, especially the early days of the movement, and helping to create that movement and bring that to life, I think has been, you know, has had a very profound impact on the reality of many millions of people's lives. I think, you know, some of the important work I've done also has not actually been in demonstrations. It's been in election work. I'm very proud of the work that I did in the David Dinkins mayoral campaign, in his first campaign when he became mayor. It's the first time an African American became mayor of the city of New York. And not that I didn't have some disagreements with him about this or that issue, but I think that was a real advance over Ed Koch to have him elected. Right. So, you know, I do feel that there have been moments. I even think the February 15th mobilization last year was very, very critical, because what that did was to crystallize the fact that there is a vibrant anti-war peace and justice movement in this country. Even though we couldn't stop that war, that it sort of resurfaced a kind of activism that had been missing for many years. And that's what we're going to see again on the streets of New York at the end of this summer.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Leslie Cagan.
Thank you.